If you meet anyone in retirement who has any one of these 5 items, that individual is either quite wealthy or soon to be quite poor in most circumstances. This video is about the things that you should not own in retirement, at least unless you have a lot of money, and you should probably consider selling them before you go into retirement because their upkeep is huge. And here's why this mistake gets made quite often. When you go into retirement, you have had 30, 40 years, many times, of really solid, good earnings. And over that time, you've paid for some pretty big things. College educations for the kids, potentially a house, a resort home or a second home. The fact is, going into retirement, it's hard to believe that you can't spend exactly like you did during your working years. Of course, people can if they lived frugally and they saved a lot of money, but there is a shift. And that shift means that the things that you spent money on, the big things like a college education, a new home for the first time, for example, and a lot of other big purchases, you just can't do in retirement and maintain your level of investment and savings that you had before. People inherently know this, of course, at least the people watching this channel for the most part, I would say, do know this. But there are 5 particular items that jump out to anyone in the rearview mirror that might not be obvious when you're looking at it in the beginning. And this video is about what those 5 things are that you should sell before you go into retirement. And before we jump into the list, I want to point out that there are people that go into retirement and they have that one big thing. It's the thing that they have to have. And if they have that one big thing, it's okay for them to forego other pleasures because this is the one thing that they want to devote their time and money to. Just know it going in. All right, number 1, a high-end sports car. I have a friend. Let's call him Ike. That's not his real name. I don't want to get that phone call from Ike saying, hey, you mentioned me on the channel, but let's call him Ike. I will say it rhymes with Ike, but it's not Ike. Anyway, Ike owns a Ferrari, a 2015 California T Roadster. What's really interesting about the situation, though, is that Ike, while he did well in his career, he was an engineer, he didn't have a mega $1 million a year job to own a Ferrari. But yet, he was able to afford the California T Roadster, and I'll show you how he did it, because frankly, you could too, at least many of you could too, but when you're done with this section of the video, you probably won't want to. And I will point out what's really interesting about a Ferrari is that the average person will look at that and say, yep, I will buy that after my second home and before my third home, somewhere in between the second and third home as a toy purchase. People don't just buy that as the thing that they go into retirement with, except for Ike. Here's how Ike purchased his car. First of all, he didn't announce to anyone that he was going out to buy a Ferrari. It just showed up one day. And when we were talking about his car, he asked me if I wanted to go for a ride. I said, yeah, I definitely want to go for a ride. We got in the car and he asked me if I wanted to drive. I got in the driver's seat and noticed that the odometer had 69,000 miles on it. Now, either Ike had kept the car hidden for the previous 5 or 6 years or so, or he bought it pre-owned, which was what he would have done, of course. We got on the road and it was an amazing car, of course, but it was also one that was very much not a commuter car. You wouldn't drive your Ferrari to and from the office every day, so it truly was a toy for Ike. Here's the point though, a 10-year-old Ferrari or nearly 10-year-old Ferrari with 69,000 miles isn't going to be that expensive because exotic sports cars do drop significantly in value when you reach a certain mileage mark. That's why when you see them in the trader magazines, they have 10 or 15,000 miles because they're still relatively new, and because they're still relatively new, they can be sold for a big price. But when you get to the point where they have less life in front of them than they had behind them, well, their value starts to drop very quickly. And that's because of the maintenance cost. And that's exactly the point. A Ferrari with 69,000 miles is going to be expensive to maintain. Doing a quick internet search, here's what it costs to maintain the Ferrari, more or less. First, regular maintenance runs about $750 per visit. That's things like a belt, a spark plug, if they still have spark plugs. I don't know anything about cars, but I just know what regular maintenance means to me. An oil change, etc. About $750 per visit. Let's assume you do it once a year. Maybe you do it twice, I don't know. Next, the car needs maintenance at major service points. That runs $1,850 before parts and labor. And generally they find things wrong at these points, and those things need to get fixed as well. Tires on a Ferrari aren't like tires on your SUV. They don't last 35,000 miles, and they're not all weather, usually, I suppose. And new tires run $1,000 to $3,000, and they last between 15 and 20,000 miles. Now that all seems like a lot, but most people sort of in their minds think about those items as the ones that they need to pay for, but there's more. New brakes and rotors run between $5,000 and $10,000 for a Ferrari. Then there's the clutch, which is pretty reliable on this model from what I've read, but if it needs to be replaced, it's going to be between $3,000 and $8,000, depending on how hard you drove the car. And just for good measure, it actually doesn't change the economics, but the car does have a twin-turbo V8 and uses premium fuel. That's going to cost quite a bit to power that car when you do take it out on the road. Then there's insurance. That's going to run between $3,000 and $8,000 per year, depending on driving history, location, deductible, what you want covered, and a whole list of other things. Now, if you ask Ike if he will ever give up the car, the answer is absolutely not. But if you talk to his spouse, Ella, that's not her real name, but rhymes with Ella, she would say, I want that car out of the house as fast as possible. My guess is that in that relationship, Ella is going to win that battle eventually. Next is your offshore fishing boat. Now, if you're a boater, you know that there are two classes of boats. One goes in the lake, the other goes in the ocean. And the boat that goes in the ocean is generally quite a bit more expensive than the one that goes in the lake, sometimes 5 to 10 times as much because of the equipment, the whole design, the electronics, the insurance, and a whole host of other things, which we'll talk about in a moment. Now, let's be honest, if you are a boater, there's a certain excitement that exists when you take your boat offshore into infinity that doesn't exist on a lake. Now, don't get me wrong, the Schmidts are lake boaters. We do have boats in our family, not me personally, but we've always had a boat on a lake, not an ocean faring boat. But there's something exciting about a boat that goes offshore. The most common form of offshore fishing boat is what's called a center console boat. It runs between $20,000 and $80,000, depending on how you buy it, how it's equipped, who makes it, what the add-ons are, etc. This is a one-time cost. You pay it once and you don't pay it again. Everything that goes into the boat from that point forward is the maintenance cost. And here is the list of the maintenance items. First, engine maintenance runs between $1,000 and $4,000 per year. Hull cleaning runs about $750 per year. Bottom paint runs about $1,500 to $3,500 per year, and that needs to be done every year. General repairs run between $2,000 and $5,000 per year. Trailer maintenance runs between $300 and $800 per year. And of course, you need a marina slip because you generally need to park it somewhere. That runs between $100 and $300 per month for the months that it's on the water. And when it's not on the water, you need dry storage. That's between $1,000 and $5,000 per year, depending on where you live. These boats burn between 1 gallon and 2 gallons per mile. Yes, you heard me correctly, a half mile to a mile per gallon. For reference, one of the worst, if not the worst, mileage vehicles out there is the Dodge Ram 1500 TRX, which gets about 14 miles per gallon on the highway. So it's somewhere between 14 and 28 times worse fuel efficiency. That's, call it $5,000 to $15,000 per year in fuel alone just to operate the boat. Insurance runs between $500 and $1,500 per year. Fishing gear and tackle runs between $1,000 and $5,000 per year. And permits and licenses run between $50 and $300 per year. So your total operating costs run between $13,500 and $37,000 per year, more or less. Next up is a motorhome. Now let's be honest, who doesn't like sitting behind the wheel of a giant motorhome cruising down the highway, even if it's for an hour or so during your lifetime? Even the idea of doing it once is kind of thrilling. But like boats, there are different types of motorhomes. Class A motorhomes, which are kind of bus-like, very large, are between $100,000 and $500,000 to purchase, and they can accommodate the needs of a fairly large family. Class B camper vans run between $60,000 and $200,000 for the high-end version anyway, and then Class C mid-size motorhomes run between $75,000 and $250,000. In this example, we're going to talk about the Class C motorhome. It's one of the more common, and we're going to talk just about the maintenance costs. That's after the $75,000 to $250,000 to purchase the motorhome. For a Class C, oil changes run between $100 and $300 every 3,000 to 5,000 miles. Brakes are between $300 and $500 per year. Tire replacement, $1,200 to $2,500 every 5 to 7 years. Engine tune-ups between $200 and $500 for things like filters, fluids, and inspections. Roof sealing and patching is between $200 and $500 per year. Exterior wash runs between $100 and $300 annually. Winterizing between $100 and $200 per year. Water heater tank maintenance between $50 and $300 for cleaning and maintenance every single year. And then there's the electrical system, which is its own maintenance category, but it does need to be maintained. Battery replacement runs $200 to $600 every 5 years. Refrigerator maintenance between $200 and $400 per year. The HVAC system between $100 and $300 annually. Stove and microwave run between $50 and $150 per year. And then there's just general maintenance. Transmission services between $300 and $1,000 per year. Suspension and alignment, $200 to $600 a year. Interior deep cleaning between $100 and $300 annually. Fuel runs about $4,000 for every 10,000 miles driven. Insurance will run between $800 and $2,500 per year. Outdoor storage runs between $600 and $1,200 per year. And if you want to put your mobile home in a climate-controlled environment, that's between $1,000 and $3,000 per year. Registration, taxes, and fees, $100 to $500 a year. Campground fees run between $25 and $75 per night. So the total runs between $6,550 per year and $18,550 per year before depreciation of the vehicle, which is about $5,000 to $10,000 per year. This gives a grand total of $11,550 to $28,550 per year to own a motorhome. Next is what I call a large estate-style home. You can call it whatever you want, but it's a big home, and you are there potentially with your spouse, but the kids have all moved out. Now, one of the things about the 1990s that happened was building materials, the cost of building materials came way down. And so what happened at the same time is a lot of these larger homes started to be built, and people could afford them because, frankly, the costs were down, and many families had two professional incomes, which allowed them to afford a home like an estate-style home. And this trend continued over the last several years because interest rates have come down, and there's a general mantra out there that, at least there used to be, I'm not sure if it still exists today, that an individual or a family should buy the biggest home that they can afford because their income was going to grow into it at some point. But even if you can afford such a large home, the cost to heat and cool that home sometimes is the same as the cost of a mortgage payment, in many cases anyway. But more importantly, the cost to maintain a home is about 1% of the value of the home. So if you have a home that costs $500,000, $750,000, $1 million, well, $1 million home is going to have a $10,000 per year cost to maintain that home. And these are things like new sidewalks or saving for a new heating and air conditioning system for the home. These are must-have maintenance items. They're not things that you can just skip, at least not long-term. So if you have a big home and you've been able to afford all of that because you've had a nice size income, know that it feels a lot different when you go into retirement, and things do wear out. And even if you have a lot of money saved for retirement, often people choose to put their money elsewhere. Next is an unused timeshare. Now, let me say that I am not an anti-timeshare evangelist. I think that there are times where a timeshare actually does serve a great function. My biggest issue with a timeshare isn't the concept of a timeshare, it's the shady sales practices that go along with the industry. And what I'm talking about are the high-pressure sales tactics combined with the feel-good state that someone's in when they're in their timeshare, and the belief that it's always going to feel like that when they're on vacation, so they want to recreate it every single year. Add to this credit card style interest rates, the belief that you can book a unit nationally only to find out later that it is scarcer than hen's teeth to actually get a unit at the time that you want anyway. And invariably what happens at the end, when your unit is finally paid off and you're in maintenance mode, and we'll talk about maintenance mode in a moment, you get the call or the email. Now, this is usually 15 years on, and the timeshare company has a list of people who have not used their timeshare. That email goes something like this. Dear Mr. Smith, we notice that you are not using your timeshare, and we want to help you help yourself when it comes to the annual maintenance costs. We're willing to cancel your maintenance agreement on the timeshare unit, and you just give us back the unit, and we'll call it even. Now think about this for a moment. Someone pays $20, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 or more, depending on the quality of the timeshare and the desirability of the timeshare, I suppose, in the month that you buy it or the week that you buy it. And you get a request to turn your unit in for free, and they'll cancel the monthly or the annual maintenance costs that you pay. Well, that's not really a deal for anyone except for the timeshare company, because then they're going to turn around and resell the timeshare. It's actually quite distasteful, right up there with used car sales. And to complete the thought, there are times when a timeshare makes sense. It's when you're using it. Now, statistically, 15 years on, that feeling that you had in year one and even year two and maybe even year three will be completely gone. But if you're using the unit and it's been replaced by a family tradition of you going skiing together up at a ski lodge or down to Florida at one of the theme parks, and you do it every year consistently and everybody's committed to it, it kind of makes sense. Or if you use the timeshare or let your family use the timeshare or friends use the timeshare, again, it kind of makes sense. Or it stops making sense is when no one is using the unit. And in that instance, you're still paying that big maintenance fee every single year. But you pay it because you've invested all of this time and money in that unit, and you don't really want to give it up at this point. Those maintenance fees aren't usually big enough to force you to give up the unit, but they are big enough to make a difference in the quality of your retirement if you're not using the unit. And if you're planning on selling your unit, I will say that the timeshare company probably will not help you, at least not help you in a way that makes economic sense to both you and the timeshare company. And this is particularly true if they're still building. But even if they're not, they have you in a very vulnerable position, which is you're not using the timeshare and something is better than nothing. And the timeshare company has created a scenario, it's right there in the agreement, and it's hard to see when you're thinking about how wonderful the place is. They've created a scenario where it's almost impossible to sell your unit at a price that makes sense. And that is, almost all timeshares come with something. If you're in a ski location, they come with lift tickets for 5, 10, 15 years or more, maybe even the life of your time with the timeshare company. But the moment you sell that timeshare in the secondary market, well, it doesn't come with lift tickets. It's right in the agreement. The same thing would be true with a Florida theme park type of timeshare. And the problem, of course, is that the rational buyer out there isn't going to look at the price of theme park tickets and say, okay, what's 15 years worth of theme park tickets? Let me take that off of the purchase price and I'll just pay you the difference. The rational buyer is going to know that there are no other buyers for the timeshare and they're going to get a great price. Still, if you're not using the timeshare, perhaps it is time to sell because of the maintenance costs. And these are $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 per year or more sometimes. And empty nesters are paying this and not using the unit. If you like this video, check out that video. Retirees spend 80% of their income in these 5 areas. It's one of our most popular with over 1.4 million views. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so that you get alerted the next time we post a video. We post several times a week, and we're posting a lot of really good, very current content that relate to retirees and their retirement finances. This is Jeff Schmidt, and I will see you in that video right there.
Holy Schmidt!